Sunlight streamed through the high window blinds of the Cook County Courthouse in suburban Chicago. Despite the bright summer day, the room was chilly from the powerful air conditioners. Zaria Olusegun shivered, pulling her thin black jacket tighter. It was not only the chill that made her uncomfortable. Every glance at her stepmother sitting at the plaintiff's table evoked a mixture of anger and bitterness inside. Imani Olusegun looked flawless in her austere black dress. She carefully blotted the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief as the insurance company's lawyer asked her another question. "Mrs. Olusegun, you state that your husband had no chronic illness before the sudden deterioration of his health. Is that correct?" A man in a gray suit asked, adjusting his glasses. "Yes." Imani's voice trembled. "My Dakari has always been a healthy man. He even joked that he never got sick. It happened so suddenly. I still can't believe he's no longer with us." Zaria gritted her teeth. "A fine game," she thought, as she watched her stepmother play the inconsolable widow. From her seat in the audience pews, the girl could only see Imani's profile. But even so, it was obvious how skillfully she managed her emotions. Tears appeared at exactly the right moment, her voice breaking at key phrases. "As a medical professional, did you notice any troubling symptoms in your late husband?" The insurance company's attorney continued. "If I had noticed something serious, wouldn't I have done everything possible to save him?" Imani raised her voice, showing genuine indignation. 23 years as a nurse had taught me to recognize the dangerous symptoms of Dakari, just became more fatigued, sometimes complaining of headaches. We thought it was from overwork at the electric company. The judge, an older woman with gray hair pulled back into a tight bundle, watched intently. She made a note in her notebook and nodded to the lawyer to continue. Zaria stopped listening to the words. Her thoughts drifted back 3 months to the day everything changed forever. She was on her way back from her part-time job at the Sunny Corner Cafe. It was a normal Thursday, and Zaria had expected to catch her father at home. He finished work at the electric company early on Thursdays. Then they usually cooked dinner together, while Imani was on the evening shift at the hospital. But that afternoon, as she opened the door of their small one-story house in Tinley Park, she heard strange noises coming from the bathroom. Her father was lying on the floor, his body shaking with convulsions. "Daddy!" she screamed, rushing to him. "What's wrong? Daddy!" Dakari couldn't answer. His eyes rolled back, his mouth foaming. Zaria dialed 911 with trembling hands. The next hours blurred into a blur. The arrival of the ambulance, the sirens, the bright lights of the hospital, the endless waiting in the hallway. Imani didn't show up until 2 hours after Zaria's call, even though she worked at the same hospital. She'd explained it was an emergency surgery she couldn't get away from. When the doctor came out to see them, his face held no hope. "Acute renal failure," he said. "We are doing all we can, but the condition is critical." Dakari Olusegun died at dawn without regaining consciousness. Zaria remembered Imani sobbing at her husband's bedside as the nurses tried to take her away. It had seemed like genuine grief then. Now Zaria doubted everything. The lawyer's voice brought the girl back to reality. The insurance company considers it suspicious that the $500,000 policy was issued only 6 months before your husband's death. Can you comment on that? Imani straightened in her chair. Her shoulders tensed, but her face remained sad and open. Dakari and I finally paid off the house loan last year, she began calmly. He always said he wanted to secure his daughter's future and mine if something happened to him. We decided to get insurance when the financial opportunity arose. Is it a crime to take care of your family? Zaria noticed several jurors nodding sympathetically. Imani had a way of putting people at ease. After the trial was over, Zaria didn't wait for her stepmother. She quickly left the courthouse and headed for the bus stop. She needed to be alone and think. The bus dragged through the suburban streets of Tinley Park, and the girl's thoughts revolved around one question. Could Imani really have killed her father? It sounded like a plot from a crime show, but the more Zaria thought back to the last few months of Dakari's life, the more her suspicions grew. First came an unusual fatigue. Her father, always energetic and strong, began to come home from work exhausted. Then came headaches and strange mood swings. Imani cooked him special meals that were supposedly supposed to help with the fatigue. She always insisted that Dakari take the vitamins she brought from the hospital. At the door of their home, Zaria paused. She knew her stepmother wouldn't be back for a while. Imani planned to meet her friend Layla after the trial. That gave her time to look for anything that might confirm or deny her suspicions. The house greeted her with silence. Zaria methodically went through all the rooms, not knowing exactly what she was looking for. In her father and Imani's bedroom, everything had been left almost untouched since his death. Her stepmother had said it hurt her too much to sort through his things. Zaria opened her father's closet. Work shirts, casual jeans, a couple suits for special occasions, all hung in their places. On the top shelf were boxes of papers and memorabilia. The girl reached for one of them, but accidentally hit a neighboring one. It fell, scattering its contents on the floor. "Shit," Zaria mumbled, kneeling down to pick up the scattered photos and papers. Among the old snapshots of family vacations and travels, a picture she'd never seen before caught her eye. The picture was taken at the beach, sun, sand, and ocean on the horizon. In the foreground, Imani, in a brightly colored bikini, was embracing another woman. They were kissing. The woman was Layla Njeri, Imani's best friend. Zaria's hands trembled. She turned the photograph over. On the back was the date, just 4 months ago, and the caption, "Miami, my best weekend ever. Love you, E." The girl froze, remembering that period. 4 months ago, Imani had gone for 3 days to a professional nursing conference in Chicago. She had said she would be staying in a hotel with colleagues and had even shown the program of the event, but the picture was clearly not Chicago. Zaria put the picture in her jeans pocket and carefully returned the rest of her belongings to the box. Her heart was pounding. The mere fact that Imani had lied about the trip and concealed her relationship with Layla didn't yet prove involvement in the murder, but it was the first concrete deception Zaria could confirm. She went down to the kitchen and opened her laptop. The internet could provide answers to questions she was afraid to ask out loud. Zaria started by searching for symptoms of poisoning, first general, then more specific. Symptoms of slow poisoning. Poisons that cause kidney failure. How to identify antifreeze poisoning. She made the last request almost by accident, having stumbled across a mention in one of the articles. But when she started reading about the symptoms, a chill ran down her spine. Everything matched. Drowsiness, dizziness, nausea, confusion, kidney failure as the final stage. Zaria remembered her father complaining about the strange Swedish flavor in some of the dishes Imani cooked, how he'd joked that she'd overdone it with sugar. Ethylene glycol, the main component of antifreeze, had a distinctive sweet flavor. There were still bottles of antifreeze in the garage. Her father kept various technical fluids for his old Ford. Zaria rushed in there, turned on the light, and examined the shelves. Several different-sized canisters stood in a row. She didn't remember how many there had been before, or what volume. Could Imani have gotten some for her terrifying plan? The girl heard the sound of a car pulling up and looked out the small window of the garage. The cab stopped in front of the house. Imani stepped out of it, elegant in her morning outfit. She paid the driver and headed for the front door. Zaria quickly turned off the lights and slipped out of the garage through the side door. She needed time to consider her actions. If her suspicions were correct, Imani was not just a liar, but a cold-blooded killer, and possibly very dangerous. Already in her room, locked away, Zaria laid out the facts she'd gathered. The photo proved that Imani led a double life and lied about her relationship with Layla. Her father's symptoms were consistent with antifreeze poisoning. The insurance policy was relatively recent. She pulled out her phone and opened the photos taken at her father's funeral. In one of the pictures, Imani was standing next to Layla. They had shown no signs of a romantic relationship, but now Zaria noticed the looks they were exchanging. Could they have planned an assassination together? Imani knew how to slowly poison someone without arousing suspicion, and Layla might have been an accomplice or even the initiator. A knock on the door made Zaria flinch. "Zaria, are you home?" Imani's voice sounded soft, with that special caring tone she used with strangers. "I brought dinner from that Italian eatery you like." "I'm not hungry," the girl replied, trying to keep her voice sounding normal. "I have a headache, I just want to lie down." There was a pause outside the door. "All right, darling. If you change your mind, the food will be in the kitchen." Imani's footsteps drifted away down the hallway. Zaria exhaled a breath. She wasn't ready to face her stepmother face to face, for fear she wouldn't be able to hide her suspicions. She needed more solid proof and a plan of action. She opened her contacts on her phone and found Detective Callum Bakari's number. He'd asked questions after her father's death, but he'd quickly closed the case, accepting the natural causes of death theory. Maybe now he'd listen to her. Her finger hovered over the call button. What if the detective didn't believe her? What if he talked to Imani and she realized that Zaria suspected something? No. She needed to gather more information first. The girl began to make a list of things she needed to find out, the exact dates when the symptoms started, to see if her father's medical records were missing from the home medical journal that Imani kept meticulously, to see if it was possible to determine the presence of antifreeze in the body 3 months after death. It was beginning to get dark outside the window. Zaria turned on the desk lamp and continued her internet search. Her gaze periodically returned to the photo on the beach. That picture could be the key to solving the mystery of her father's death. Detective Callum Bakari's office was on the 2nd floor of the Tinley Park police station. Zaria shuffled nervously from foot to foot in the hallway, waiting to be invited in. She had spent a sleepless night rereading information about the poisonings and looking through family photos for clues. In the morning, after waiting for Imani to leave for work, she called the station and asked to see the detective who was on her father's case. The door opened and a tall man with a short haircut and attentive dark eyes looked out into the corridor. "Minus Ms. Olusegun?" he asked. "Come in, please." Zaria nodded and walked inside. The office was small and stacked with folders. On the wall hung a map of the area with colorful markings. Bakari pointed her to a chair across from his desk. "So," he said, sitting down and opening a notebook, "you wanted to talk about your father's case. It's been 3 months now. What's changed?" Zaria took a deep breath. Now, sitting in front of a professional, her suspicions seemed far-fetched, drawn out, but she decided to follow through. "I think my stepmother poisoned my father," she said quietly but firmly. Bakari slowly leaned back in his chair. His face remained impenetrable, but his eyes flashed with something akin to weariness. "This is a serious accusation, Ms. Olusegun. Do you have proof?" Zaria pulled out the photograph she had found the day before and placed it on the table. "My stepmother lied about her trip 4 months ago. She said she was going to a nursing conference in Chicago, but she was actually in Miami with her friend." She pointed to a picture. "That's Layla and Jerry. She and Imani are supposedly just friends, but as you can see, they're not." The detective took the photograph and scrutinized it, then turned it over and read the inscription on the back. "Your stepmother deceived her husband about the trip," he said thoughtfully. "It's not good, but it's not a crime, and unfortunately, not proof of murder." "But it's a motive," Zaria objected. "She led a double life. And here's the other thing. I looked into the symptoms of antifreeze poisoning. They match my father's before he died. Imani is a nurse. She knows how poisons work, how to disguise them." Bakari listened to her carefully, but there was doubt in his gaze. "Do you keep antifreeze in your garage?" "Yes, my father kept it for the car." "Did you check to see if anything had disappeared from there?" Zaria shook her head. I don't know how much there was originally, but Imani might have taken a little bit at a time so as not to arouse suspicion. The detective sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Look, Zaria, I understand that your father's death was hard on you. Sometimes in these situations we look for blame, try to find an explanation for the tragedy. But without direct evidence, I can't reopen the investigation. The medical examiner's office found nothing suspicious. They didn't look specifically for traces of antifreeze, Zaria insisted. And now Imani is trying to get insurance. $500,000. The policy was taken out only 6 months before her father died. That got Bakari thinking. He made a note in his notebook. Is the insurance company disputing the payout? Yeah, they have doubts. There's a trial going on right now. The detective drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking about what he'd heard. Okay, he said finally. I'll check a few things. I'll look at the medical report again, talk to the doctors who treated your father. But Zaria, he looked her in the eye. Don't jump to conclusions. And be careful with your accusations. If your stepmother is innocent, such words could ruin your relationship. Zaria nodded, though deep down she was sure there was nothing left to destroy. Thank you, detective. I'll look for more evidence. No. Bakari raised his hand. Leave the investigation to the professionals. If you're right and your stepmother is dangerous, you shouldn't take any chances. Live your life as usual, don't show your suspicions. The girl grudgingly agreed and got up to leave. She turned around at the door. Do you believe me? Bakari hesitated to answer. I take your words seriously, Zaria. I'll check everything I can. That's the most I can promise. It was enough. At least someone listened to her. Leaving the police station, Zaria headed towards the bus stop. Her thoughts were preoccupied with her upcoming conversation with Imani. She needed to act natural, not to arouse suspicion. But how do you pretend when you live under the same roof as the man you suspect of killing your father? Meanwhile, at Tinley Park Hospital, Imani Olusegun had finished her morning shift and headed to the cafeteria. There, she met Leyland Jerry, who worked at the same hospital as a receptionist. They sat down at a table in the far corner where no one could overhear them. She knows something, Imani said without preamble, stirring her coffee. Yesterday after the trial, Zaria avoided me, locked herself in her room, said she had a headache. And then this morning I noticed her rummaging through Dakari's things. Layla frowned. Are you sure? The box of photos was out of place. I distinctly remember putting things away. What could she have found? Imani turned pale. There was a picture of us on the beach in Miami. I forgot to put it away when we got back. I hid it among the old pictures, thinking no one would look at it. Damn it, Layla hissed. The picture only proves that we're together and that you lied about the trip. It doesn't prove the other thing. They were silent for a moment, looking around. Then Layla leaned closer and whispered, maybe we should get rid of her too. An accident or something. She's a teenager. They sometimes do rash things. Imani stared at her friend in horror. Are you crazy? She's just a kid. She's 17. She's smart enough to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And if she goes to the police... No, Imani cut her off. That's out of the question. We'll find another way out. Layla leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowed. We've come too far to stop now, Imani. Think about our plans. About the house in Florida, the life we wanted to build. All of that is only possible with insurance money. I know, Imani whispered, but killing Zaria? It's too much. I can't. Then figure out a way to control her, because if she starts digging deeper, we're both going to end up behind bars. Their conversation was interrupted by Imani's phone ringing. She glanced at the screen and turned even paler. It's from the police station. Detective Callum Bakari was sitting at his desk, going through the medical reports on the death of Dakari Olusegun. After Zaria had left, he pulled the file from the archives and immersed himself in studying the documents. At first glance, everything was clear: acute kidney failure, presumably caused by genetic predisposition and stress. There were no signs of violent death or poisoning in the report. Now, however, knowing about the possible antifreeze poisoning, Bakari noticed the inconsistencies. The symptoms described in the ambulance and hospital reports did resemble those of ethylene glycol poisoning. Convulsions, confusion, nausea, and increased blood acidity were all in evidence. He called the hospital and asked to be connected to Dr. Phelps, who was signing the death certificate. "Doctor, I'm about the case of Dakari Olusegun," Bakari began after a brief greeting. 3 months ago, died of kidney failure. "I remember the case," the doctor replied. "What are you interested in? Have you considered the possibility of poisoning?" There was a pause at the other end of the line. There was no reason for such suspicion. The symptoms pointed to natural causes. Specifically, antifreeze poisoning? The doctor thought for a moment. "We didn't run specific tests for ethylene glycol. But yes, some of the symptoms would be consistent. Pupils were dilated, metabolic acidophilia. But detective, his wife's a nurse. She would have seen the signs of poisoning. If she wasn't the one poisoning him," Bakari thought, but said aloud, "Is it possible now, 3 months after death, to determine the presence of antifreeze in the remains?" Theoretically, yes. Ethylene glycol is quickly eliminated from the body, but the products of its decomposition can remain in the tissues. It would require exhumation and special tests. "I see. Thank you, doctor." When Zaria returned home, it was past noon. She knew that Imani had to be at work until the evening, so she decided to use the time to search further. The first thing she did was head to the garage to take a closer look at the bottles of antifreeze. There were 3 canisters on the shelf. 2 were sealed, and one, the largest, was open. Zaria took it in her hands. Judging by the weight, it was half empty. Had she remembered correctly that her father rarely used antifreeze? He serviced the car mostly at the service station, doing only the simplest things at home. The girl put the canister back in its place and continued to look around the garage. Her attention was drawn to her father's work jacket hanging on a hook. Zaria stepped closer and ran her hand over the rough fabric. Something rustled in one of the pockets. The girl pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt from an auto repair shop, dated a month before her father's death. Among other work was a complete coolant replacement. Zaria frowned. If her father had replaced all the fluid in the car, why did he need open antifreeze in the garage? Putting the receipt in her pocket, she walked back into the house. Now there was one more clue to check: the Imani's cell phone. Zaria knew her stepmother always kept it with her. But maybe... She went up to Imani's bedroom and looked around. There was a clipboard lying on the bedside table. Zaria picked it up, hoping her stepmother had forgotten to log out of her account. To her surprise, the tablet was not password protected. The girl quickly opened the browser and checked her search history. Most of them were related to work or everyday things. But here, a month before her father's death, a few queries caught her attention. Can ethylene glycol be detected in an autopsy? How quickly antifreeze is eliminated from the body. Symptoms of coolant poisoning. Zaria's heart beat faster. This was it. Direct proof. She quickly took screenshots on her phone, then returned the tablet to its place. The gray sky loomed over the courthouse, promising rain. Zaria Olusegun stood at the entrance, clutching the evidence folder in her hand. Today was supposed to be the crucial hearing of the insurance payout case, and the girl was ready to reveal the truth. Detective Callum Bakari stood beside her, his presence giving her confidence. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, looking at her carefully. "We could wait for the results of the forensics." Zaria shook her head. "No, detective. I can't let her get that money. She killed my father." The last few days had been filled with tension. After Zaria found searches on Imani's tablet about antifreeze poisoning, Detective Bakari secured permission to exhume the body of Dakari Olusegun. The remains have been sent for toxicology examination, but the results are yet to come. In the meantime, Imani was acting as if nothing had happened as she continued to pose as a grieving widow and prepared for another court hearing. "All right," Bakari nodded. "But let me speak first. I have some news." They entered the courthouse. In the hallway, Zaria saw Imani talking to a lawyer. Standing next to her was Layla Njeri, who had supposedly come to support her friend. When Imani spotted Zaria accompanied by the detective, her eyes narrowed, but she quickly pulled a sad smile on her face. "Zaria, dear," she called out, "I'm glad you've come. This is an important day for our family." The girl felt nausea rise to her throat at her stepmother's hypocrisy, but she forced herself to nod. Detective Bakari squeezed her shoulder lightly, letting her know she wasn't alone. "Detective," Imani greeted coldly, "I didn't expect to see you here. This is a civil trial. I have reason to be here, Mrs. Oluskan," Bakari replied. "You will soon find out what they are." Layla shifted nervously from foot to foot, her eyes darting between Imani and the detective. "We should go in," she said, tugging on her friend's sleeve. The hearing would start soon. The courtroom was much the same as last time. The same tall windows, the same rows of benches, the same cold, air-conditioned space. Zaria sat behind the insurance company's attorney, while Imani took her seat at the plaintiff's table. Detective Bakari remained standing at the entrance, watching the proceedings. The judge, an elderly woman with gray hair gathered in a tight bundle, entered the room and took her seat. "We continue with the hearing on the death insurance claim of Dakari Olusegun," she announced. "Plaintiff's counsel, did you wish to submit additional documents?" Counsel for Imani, a thin man in an expensive suit, rose from his seat. "Yes, Your Honor. We have medical reports confirming that Mr. Olusgun did not suffer from any chronic illness before his untimely death. The insurance company is unreasonably delaying payment, causing emotional distress to the widow and—" "Excuse me, Your Honor," came the voice of Detective Bakari, who stepped forward. "I would like to make a statement directly related to this case." The judge looked at him in surprise. "You're not a party to the trial, Detective. On what grounds?" "On the grounds that the death of Dakari Olusegun is now the subject of a criminal investigation," Bakari said firmly. "We have reason to believe that Mr. Olusegun was poisoned." A whisper rippled through the hall. Imani straightened in her seat, her face white as chalk. Layla, seated among the audience, froze, eyes wide. "This is a serious allegation, Detective," the judge said. "Do you have proof?" "Yesterday, we received the preliminary results of the toxicological examination conducted after the exhumation of the body," Bakari replied. "Traces of ethylene glycol and its metabolites were found in the tissues. That's the main component of antifreeze, Your Honor. Mr. Olusegun was poisoned." The room was now completely silent. All eyes turned to Imani, who sat as still as a statue. "This is absurd," exclaimed her lawyer. "My client lost her husband, and now they are trying to accuse her of his murder? On what grounds?" "We have a witness," Bakari said, turning to Zaria. "Ms. Olusgun, please." Zaria stood up, feeling her knees trembling. She opened a folder and pulled out the search photos from Imani's tablet. "My stepmother was interested in antifreeze poisoning a month before my father died," she said as she handed the pictures to the judge. "She was looking for information about how quickly antifreeze is eliminated from the body and whether it could be detected in an autopsy." The judge scrutinized the pictures, then raised her eyes to Imani. "Mrs. Olusgun, can you explain this?" Imani finally came out of her stupor. She rose from her seat, remaining remarkably calm. "Of course, Your Honor. I am a nurse, and part of my job is to study various cases of poisoning. At the time, a patient came in with suspected antifreeze poisoning, and I wanted to better understand the symptoms and course of the disease." "That's a lie," Zaria objected. "I have something else." She pulled from a folder a photograph she'd found of Imani and Layla on a beach in Miami. "My stepmother was leading a double life. She's having an affair with Layla Njeri, who's sitting in this room right now." When my father was alive, Imani lied to him, saying she was going to a nursing conference in Chicago, but was actually in Miami with her mistress. Layla jumped up from her seat. This is an invasion of privacy. What does a personal relationship have to do with an insurance case? Directly, Detective Bakari replied. Motive. Mrs. Alusgun wanted to start a new life with Miss Njeri by getting her husband's insurance money. $500,000 is not a bad incentive. The judge called the case to order by tapping her gavel. I can see that this case is much more complicated than it originally appeared. In light of the new circumstances, the insurance payment hearing is adjourned pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Your Honor, counsel for the insurance company intervened. We would like to freeze all funds associated with this policy until a final decision is made. Sustained. The judge nodded. Detective Bakari, I assume you have any further action to take? Bakari nodded and signaled to the two policemen waiting at the door of the hall. Imani Olusegun, you are under arrest on suspicion of the murder of Dakari Olusegun, he said formally. You have the right to remain silent. Imani did not resist as her wrists were cuffed. She stared straight ahead, her face showing no emotion. Layla tried to slip out of the hall, but a second policeman blocked her way. Layla Njeri, you are also under arrest as an accessory to murder, he said. What? No exclamation mark, Layla exclaimed. I didn't do anything. It was her. She pointed at Imani. I told her it was too risky, but she insisted. She said no one would suspect the nurse of poisoning. The hall exploded with noise. The judge banged her gavel, calling for order, but it was too late. Layla had already spilled her guts. Imani looked at her with cold fury. Shut up, you fool, she hissed, but her words were drowned out in the general clamor. Zaria stood there, unable to believe her ears. Layla's confession had sounded so sudden that for a moment she thought it wasn't happening to her. Detective Bakari walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. It's over, he said quietly. You got justice for your father. As the police officers led Imani and Layla out of the courtroom, it began to rain. Coarse drops drummed on the roof of the building, as if nature was expressing its own feelings about what was happening. Zaria watched her stepmother and her co-defendant being put into different police cars. Imani didn't even dignify her stepdaughter with a glance, while Layla continued to shout something, trying to justify herself. What happens now? Zaria asked the detective. They'll go to trial, Bakari answered. With Layla's confession and the evidence we've gathered, the prosecutor will have a strong case. They'll get what they deserve. And me? The girl asked quietly. What's going to happen to me? Bakari thought for a moment. You're 17 now, soon to be 18. Legally, you are still a minor, but the court can recognize you as emancipated. Or you can live with relatives until you come of age. I have an Aunt Nikki, my father's sister, Zaria said. She offered to let me stay with her. That's a good option. The detective nodded. I'll talk to social services to make sure it's done right. They stood under the courthouse canopy, watching the rain wash the dust off the streets of Tinley Park. Zaria felt strangely devastated. Months of suspicion, fear, and uncertainty were over, but something else had gone with them. The last connection to her old life, to the house where she'd grown up. I need to get my things out of the house, she said. Can I do it today? Of course, Bakari answered. I'll drive you and wait for you. You shouldn't go back there alone. There are too many memories. The house greeted them with silence and emptiness. Zaria went up to her room and began to gather the essentials. Clothes, books, pictures of her father all went into a large gym bag. As she passed by Imani and her father's bedroom, she slowed her step. Should she go in there? Making up her mind, she opened the door. The room looked untouched. A wide bed neatly made, a closet of clothes, pictures on the walls. Zaria walked over to the bedside table on the side where her father slept. The drawer held his watch, notebook, and a worn leather wallet. She took these things, held them to her chest. They belonged to her now, the last tangible reminders of the man who loved her unconditionally. When she came downstairs, Detective Bakari was on the phone. When he saw her, he ended the conversation. "That was the prosecutor," he said. Layla had agreed to testify against Imani in exchange for a reduced sentence. She said they planned the murder together, but Imani did the main part, putting antifreeze in your father's food, gradually, over a period of weeks. Zaria felt a lump come up to her throat. Was he in agony? Bakari paused, then shook his head. Dr. Phelps said that in such cases, poisoning usually causes drowsiness, confusion. Your father probably didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. It was a faint consolation, but better than nothing. Zaria nodded and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned around, looking around at the house that would never be her home again. "I'm ready," she said quietly. 6 months later, Zaria sat in the courtroom, listening to the judge read the verdict. Imani Olusegun was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole for 25 years. Leyland Jerry, under a plea bargain, received 15 years with the possibility of parole in 7 years. When the hearing was over, Zaria walked out of the courthouse with Aunt Nikki. It was sunny outside. Spring was taking hold. Detective Bakari was waiting for them at the entrance. "How are you?" he asked with genuine concern. "Better," Zaria replied. Day by day it was getting easier. It was true. Life with Aunt Nikki turned out to be peaceful and comfortable. Zaria graduated from high school and enrolled in community college, choosing to major in forensics. The experience of solving her father's murder changed her view of the world, showing her that justice is possible if you fight for it. "The insurance company has finally made a decision," Aunt Nikki said. "Since Imani has been found guilty of murder, she is not entitled to a payout. The money will be transferred to Zaria as the only legal heir." Bakari smiled. "That's the right thing to do. Your father wanted to secure your future." Zaria nodded. The money couldn't bring her father back, but it gave her the opportunity to start a new life, to get the education he'd always wanted for her. "I think he would be pleased," she said, looking up at the clear sky. He always said the truth would find its way. They walked down the street, discussing plans for the future. Zaria felt a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of suspicion, fear, and grief had given way to quiet acceptance and hope. Justice had been done for Dakari Olusegun, and now his daughter could move on, keeping his memory in her heart. "You know," she said, stopping at a small park where she and her father often walked, "sometimes I still talk to him. I tell him about my progress, my plans. I think he hears." "I'm sure he does," Bakari replied softly. "Those we love never leave completely." Zaria smiled and looked ahead to where the road went to the horizon. There was a lifetime ahead of her, and she was ready to face it with the same courage she had fought for the truth.